My daughter-in-law looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not invited to the wedding. You're not really family." I smiled politely, congratulated them both, and walked away. What she didn't know was that I had already paid for everything. The venue, the flowers, the catering, everything. The next morning, when the bills came due, she learned exactly who family was. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The conversation happened on a Tuesday afternoon in my own living room, which somehow made it worse. I had baked lemon bars that morning, the kind my son Marcus had loved since he was 7 years old. They were cooling on the kitchen counter, filling the house with that sweet citrus smell that usually meant comfort in home. Instead, that scent would forever be linked in my memory with the moment my family fractured. I'm Helen Cartwright, and at 63 years old, I thought I understood how the world worked. I'd raised Marcus alone after my husband died when our boy was only 9. I'd worked double shifts as a nurse at County General, put myself through night school to get my nursing degree upgraded, and somehow managed to be at every soccer game, every parent-teacher conference, every moment that mattered. Marcus grew up to be a successful architect. The kind of man who called his mother every Sunday and never forgot her birthday. I thought I'd done something right. Then he met Victoria Chun at some gallery opening in downtown Seattle. She was 28 to his 35 with a kind of polished beauty that comes from expensive salons and personal trainers. Her family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the Pacific Northwest. And she'd grown up in a world where money was never discussed because it was simply assumed. I could see the appeal. She was striking, confident, articulate. She made Marcus laugh in a way I hadn't heard since before his father died. Their courtship was a whirlwind. 6 months from first date to engagement. Marcus brought her to Sunday dinners at my house and I tried my best to make her feel welcome. I asked about her work in hotel management, complimented her designer clothes, learned to make the Thai iced tea she mentioned liking once in passing. But there was always this distance, this invisible wall she kept between us. When I hugged Marcus hello, she would stand back checking her phone. When I told stories about Marcus as a child, she would smile tightly and change the subject. I told myself it was just adjustment. Different backgrounds, different worlds colliding. These things took time. The engagement party should have been my first warning. Victoria's parents hosted it at their flagship hotel, the Imperial Aurora, with its sweeping views of Elliott Bay and crystal chandeliers that cost more than my annual salary. 200 guests, all from Victoria's world, tech entrepreneurs, hotel magnates, people who summered in the Hamptons and wintered in Aspen. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I bought for Marcus's college graduation, and felt immediately out of place among women dripping in diamonds and designer labels. Marcus introduced me to Victoria's parents, Richard and Patricia Chun. Richard gave me a firm handshake and a professional smile. Patricia looked at me the way you might look at a stray dog that wandered into a 5-star restaurant, polite, but vaguely alarmed by my presence. "How lovely to finally meet Marcus's mother," Patricia said. Her accent carrying the crisp edges of private schools and finishing classes. "Marcus has told us so much about his upbringing." The way she said upbringing made it sound like a condition he'd recovered from. I spent most of that evening standing near the catering table, watching my son navigate a world I'd never been part of. He looked happy. I told myself that was what mattered. Victoria kept her hand on his arm possessively, steering him from group to group, introducing him with pride. She never once brought him over to where I stood. When I left early, claiming an early shift at the hospital, Marcus walked me to my car. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, and I heard genuine concern in his voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Just tired. Victoria's parents throw quite a party. They can be a lot," he admitted. "But they mean well. And Victoria, she's just nervous about you liking her." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, and wondered when he'd learned to lie to himself. "I'm sure we'll warm up to each other," I said, kissing his cheek. "These things take time." 3 months later came the Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. Marcus had called that morning, asking if he could bring Victoria by after work. "We want to talk to you about the wedding plans," he said, excitement clear in his voice. "Victoria has some idea. She wants to run by you." I'd been thrilled. Finally, an olive branch, a chance to be included to help plan my only child's wedding. I'd taken the afternoon off from the hospital, stopped by the farmer's market for fresh lemons, and baked those lemon bars Marcus loved. I'd even bought fresh flowers for the coffee table, and made sure the house looked perfect. They arrived at 4:30. Marcus looked tired but happy in his work clothes. His tie loosened and his hair slightly mussed the way it always got when he'd been concentrating on a design. Victoria wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. Her black hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless. "Mom, something smells amazing," Marcus said, heading straight for the kitchen. "Lemon bars," I called after him. "Still warm." Victoria remained in the living room, perching on the edge of my sofa like she was afraid it might contaminate her designer suit. She pulled out her phone and began scrolling through something while I poured iced tea into my good glasses, the ones my mother had left me. "So," I said, settling into my armchair across from Victoria while Marcus joined us with a lemon bar already half. "Tell me about these wedding plans. I've been so excited to hear what you two are thinking." Marcus and Victoria exchanged a look. One of those couple communications that happens in silence. He nodded at her encouragingly. "Well," Victoria began, setting her phone down with deliberate care. "We've decided on the Imperial Aurora for the venue, the grand ballroom specifically. It's where my parents got married and where my grandmother got married before that. It's something of a family tradition." "That sounds beautiful," I said, meaning it. "When are you thinking?" "June 15th, a Saturday evening ceremony followed by dinner and dancing. We're expecting about 300 guests. 300 guests. The number alone made my head spin. My wedding to Marcus's father had been 30 people in a church basement with potluck dishes and a friend's cousin playing guitar. We've hired Evangeline Rose as our wedding planner." Victoria continued. "She does all the society weddings in Seattle. Very exclusive, very expensive, but worth every penny. She's already secured the most amazing florist, and we've got appointments scheduled with 3 different caterers next week." I listened as Victoria outlined a wedding that sounded more like a coronation: ice sculptures, a 12-piece orchestra, custom cocktails named after the couple, a wedding cake that would be 7 tiers of architectural marvel. Each detail she described seemed designed to impress, to overwhelm, to establish status. "It sounds like you've got everything planned out," I said when she finally paused for breath. "Is there anything I can help with?" Another look passed between them. "Actually, Mom," Marcus said, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "That's kind of what we wanted to talk to you about. The wedding, it's going to be expensive. Really expensive. Victoria's parents have offered to cover most of it, but there are some costs that are, well, they're substantial." My heart jumped. "Course. Whatever you need, sweetheart. I've been saving. I always knew I wanted to contribute to your wedding. I've been saving since Marcus was in college, actually. A small account I've been adding to whenever I could, imagining this day. It wasn't much by Victoria's standards probably, but it was something. It was a mother's contribution to her son's happiness." "That's so generous, Helen," Victoria said. "And it was the first time she'd ever called me by my first name instead of Mrs. Cart, right?" Something about the way she said it made my skin prickle, but I think there might be some confusion about the level of expense we're talking about. This isn't going to be a backyard barbecue situation. The condescension in her voice was so subtle that for a moment I thought I'd imagined it, but then I saw Marcus says and I knew I hadn't. "I understand that, Victoria. I may not come from your world, but I know what weddings cost. Tell me what you need and I'll do what I can to help." Victoria picked up her phone again, scrolling until she found what she was looking for. She turned the screen toward me. It was a spreadsheet color-coded and detailed. My eyes scanned the numbers. Venue rental $90,000. Catering $75,000. Flowers $40,000. Photography and videography $30,000. The list went on and on. each line item representing an amount that made my nurse's salary look like pocket change. At the bottom in bold red numbers. Total estimated cost $450,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. $450,000, I repeated numbly. It's a lot, we know, Marcus said quickly. But Victoria's parents are covering the bulk of it. The venue, the orchestra, the hotel rooms for out-of-town guests. They're being incredibly generous, but there are still some costs that we need to cover ourselves. And we were hoping. How much? I interrupted, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. $60,000, Victoria said smoothly. For the catering, the photography, and the flowers. Victoria's parents are handling everything else. But these are the three areas where we wanted to make our own choices, not just default to their preferences. $60,000. I had $17,000 saved. $17,000 accumulated over years of putting away small amounts of denying myself vacations and new cars and all the little luxuries that make life easier. I have $17,000, I said quietly. I've been saving since Marcus started college. It's not 60, but that's very sweet, Victoria interrupted, her tone making it clear that $17,000 was barely worth mentioning. But I think you misunderstand. We weren't asking for a contribution. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So, if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. Means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We were informing you of the cost because, well, we need to discuss something uncomfortable. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to us as if she couldn't bear to look at me while she said whatever came next. The thing is, Helen, this wedding is going to be a very specific kind of event. Victoria's family, their friends, their business associates. These are all people who exist in a certain social sphere. The guest list has been curated very carefully to maintain a certain atmosphere, a certain level of sophistication. Victoria cut in, turning to face me. The word you're dancing around is sophistication, Marcus. Let's just be honest. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. I could see him struggling, caught between the woman he loved and the mother who raised him. What Victoria means, he tried again, is that the wedding is going to be very formal. Black tie seated dinner, that kind of thing. And the guest list it's mostly Victoria's family and their friends. My side is much smaller. Just a few college friends, some guys from work. Understanding began to dawn, cold and terrible. You're saying the wedding is too fancy for my friends. Said slowly. Too sophisticated for the people I know. We're saying there are space limitations, Victoria replied. Her voice crisp and businesslike. Now, as if we were negotiating a contract rather than discussing my son's wedding. 300 guests sounds like a lot. But when you account for Victoria's extended family, her parents' business obligations, the people we need to invite for professional reasons, well, the list fills up fast. How many people from my side? I asked Marcus directly, ignoring Victoria entirely now. He couldn't meet my eyes. 8 plus you 9 total. 9 people out of 300. Is he? I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. And these 8 people, who are they? Marcus rattled off names. His college roommate and his wife. 2 couples from his architecture firm. His godfather, Uncle Barry, and Aunt Linda. That was 8. And me, I confirmed. The silence that followed lasted approximately 3 seconds, but it felt like hours. Actually, Mom, that's the other thing we needed to talk about. I looked at Victoria, whose expression had shifted into something resembling pity, which was somehow worse than contempt. Helen, she said, moving to sit on the arm of Marcus's chair, placing her hand on his shoulder in a gesture that was clearly possessive. You have to understand, this wedding represents a merging of 2 families. 2 very different families. Victoria's parents, their friends, they have certain expectations about how things should be done. The social dynamics, the optics, they matter in their world. What does that have to do with me being at my son's wedding? My voice had gone quiet. The kind of quiet that usually preceded something explosive. The thing is, Victoria continued, apparently immune to danger signals. You don't really fit the aesthetic we're going for. Your background, your profession, it's all very admirable, very noble, but it doesn't align with the narrative we're presenting. We're trying to showcase two successful families coming together. Two people who are equals in every way. Having you there front and center as mother of the groom, it complicates that narrative." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Marcus had gone pale. "Victoria, that's not how we discuss phrasing this. There's no good way to phrase it, Marcus. Your mother is a nurse. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. She lives in a modest house in a modest neighborhood. That's not an insult. Just facts. But facts matter at events like this. What will Victoria's parents' friends think when they find out the groom's mother is a nurse who lives in Greenwood? It undermines the entire image we're trying to project." I stood up slowly, carefully because I wasn't sure my legs would hold me. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," I said, proud of how level my voice remained. "You're uninviting me from my own son's wedding because I'm not rich enough, because I work for a living, because I come from a modest background and that might embarrass you in front of your fancy friends." Marcus tried to stand, but Victoria's hand on his shoulder held him down. "It's not personal, Helen. Just practical. You'd be uncomfortable anyway. You don't know these people. You don't understand their world. Wouldn't it be better for everyone if you just, I don't know, celebrated with Marcus? Separately. Maybe a nice lunch, just the two of you before the wedding." I looked at my son. This man I had sacrificed everything for. This boy I had raised alone, had worked myself to exhaustion to provide for. Had loved with every fiber of my being. He was looking at his hands, unable or unwilling to meet my eyes. "Marcus," I said, "look at me." He did finally, and I saw shame there, but not enough shame. Not enough to make him stand up, tell Victoria she was wrong. That his mother would absolutely be at his wedding because she was family, because she mattered, because love was more important than optics and image and what some rich strangers might think. "Is this what you want?" asked him. "I want Victoria to be happy," he said weakly. "I want our wedding day to be perfect. And Mom, if I'm being honest, I think Victoria might be right. You'd be uncomfortable. All those people, all that formality. It's not really your scene." Something broke inside me in that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet finality of a bone snapping cleanly in two. "You're right," I said, and I saw relief flood Marcus's face. I would be uncomfortable. I would be uncomfortable watching my son marry someone who thinks human beings can be excluded based on their net worth. I would be uncomfortable attending an event that values image over love, status over substance. So, thank you, Victoria, for sparing me that discomfort. I walked to the door, opened it, and stood waiting. "I think it's time for you both to leave now." Victoria stood immediately, gathering her phone and her designer purse with an efficiency that suggested she'd been ready for this conversation to end. Marcus moved more slowly, looking torn and miserable. "Mom, please try to understand." "Oh, I understand perfectly. You want me to understand that I'm not good enough for your new family. That everything I sacrificed, everything I gave up to raise you, all those double shifts and thrift store clothes and skipped meals so you could have better, all of that means nothing compared to maintaining the right image for Victoria's parents' country club friends." "That's not fair," Marcus protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "You're right. It's not fair. But then again, nothing about this situation is fair, is it? Now please leave. I have an early shift tomorrow." They left. Victoria clicking away in her expensive heels without a backward glance. Marcus pausing at his car to look back at the house with an expression I couldn't read and didn't want to interpret. I closed the door, locked it, and stood in my living room that still smelled like lemon bars. Then I walked to my bedroom, closed the door, and allowed myself exactly 10 minutes to cry. 10 minutes to mourn the relationship I thought I had with my son. To grieve the loss of the moment I'd imagined since he was born, watching him get married, dancing with him at his reception, welcoming his wife into our family. After 10 minutes, I dried my eyes, washed my face, and went to my home office. If Victoria Chun wanted to play games about who was and wasn't family, I was more than ready to play. But she'd made one critical miscalculation. She'd assumed I was powerless. She'd assumed that being middle class meant being without resources or connections, or the ability to fight back. She was about to learn exactly how wrong she was. I opened my laptop and pulled up the file I'd created 3 months earlier, right after the engagement party, when I'd first sensed which way the wind was blowing. I'm not naive, despite what Victoria clearly thought. I'd known there was a risk that Victoria's family would try to edge me out, would try to make this wedding entirely their production. So I'd taken steps. The file contained emails, contracts, and receipts. Lots of receipts. You see, what Victoria didn't know was that Richard Chan and I had spoken privately after that engagement party. He'd found me by my car, looking uncomfortable and slightly guilty about his wife's treatment of me. Helen, he'd said, I wanted to apologize for Patricia. She can be protective of Victoria, and sometimes that comes across as cold. It's fine, I'd said, though it wasn't. No, it's not fine. You're Marcus' mother. You matter. He'd paused, seeming to struggle with something. Look, I know my daughter. I love her, but I know her. She's going to want to control every aspect of this wedding, and that's going to include trying to minimize your role. Don't let her. Then he'd handed me a business card with a phone number written on the back. This is my private line. Call me if you need anything, and I mean anything related to the wedding. I'll make sure you're taken care of. I thought it was a kind gesture. An olive branch from a man who seemed embarrassed by his family's behavior. I'd called him a week later and we'd met for coffee. That's when I'd made my proposition. Richard Chun was a businessman, someone who understood leverage and negotiation. I told him I wanted to contribute to my son's wedding in a meaningful way, and I had $17,000 saved, but I'd also told him that I sensed conflict coming, that I worried Victoria would try to exclude me, and I wanted to protect my investment. What are you suggesting? He'd asked. I'm suggesting that you let me pay for 3 major components of the wedding. The catering, the photography, and the flowers. But I pay you directly, and you don't tell anyone, not Victoria, not even Marcus, where the money for those items came from. Let them think you're covering it. And in exchange, I want a written agreement that I'll be included in all wedding planning, that I'll have a role in the ceremony, and that I'll be seated appropriately at the reception. Richard had studied me for a long moment. You think my daughter is going to try to cut you out? I know your daughter is going to try to cut you out. The only question is whether you're going to let her. He'd smiled then. A real smile that didn't reach his eyes but conveyed respect. You're tougher than you look. Helen Cartwright. I raised a son alone while working as a nurse. Tough doesn't begin to cover it. We'd shaken hands on it. I'd liquidated my savings account and borrowed money from Uncle Barry and taken out a small personal loan. Together, I'd scraped together $60,000. And I'd signed contracts through Richard's Hotel Corporation to cover the exact 3 items Victoria had mentioned today. The catering, the photography, and the flowers. All of it was in my name. All of it was paid for. And all of it could be cancelled with a single phone call. But that wasn't the game I wanted to play. Not yet. Because sitting in my home office looking at those contracts and receipts, I realized I had something better than revenge. I had leverage. And unlike Victoria, I knew exactly how to use it. I picked up my phone and called Richard Chin's private number. He answered on the second ring. Helen, I was wondering if I'd hear from you today. Marcus called me this afternoon. He seemed upset. Did he tell you what happened? He told me there was a disagreement about the wedding. He didn't go into details. Your daughter uninvited me from the wedding to my face in my own living room. She told me I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend, that I didn't fit the aesthetic, and that having a nurse as mother of the groom would undermine the image she's trying to project. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Richard, I'm here. I'm just trying to process what you just told me. His voice had gone cold. She actually said those words about you being a nurse. Not in so many words, but the meaning was clear. And Marcus sat there and let her say it. Worse, he agreed with her. Another long silence. What do you want to do? He asked finally. I want to teach them both a lesson about respect, about what family actually means. And I want to do it in a way that makes the point clearly but doesn't destroy my relationship with my son permanently, because despite everything, I still love him. Tell me your plan. We talked for 45 minutes. By the time we hung up, I felt calmer than I had since Victoria had dropped her bombshell. I had a plan. More importantly, I had an ally. And not just any ally, Victoria's own father. As I got ready for bed that night, I thought about Marcus as a little boy, 7 years old, crying because his father had just died. I'd held him and promised him that no matter what, we'd be okay. That I would always be there for him, always take care of him, always make sure he had what he needed. I kept that promise through everything. Kept that promise. And I was about to keep it one more time. Even though he didn't know he needed it, Marcus needed to learn that love wasn't measured in dollars. That family wasn't defined by social status, and that the woman who'd raised him wasn't someone who could be dismissed and discarded when she became inconvenient. Victoria thought she'd won this round. She thought she'd successfully removed the embarrassing mother-in-law from her perfect society wedding. She had no idea what was coming. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange fog of normally. Marcus called 3 times, each conversation more awkward than the last. He wanted to explain, to justify, to make me understand why excluding me from his wedding was actually the reasonable choice. I let him talk, responded with polite monosyllables, and refused to engage in the argument he was clearly hoping to have. Victoria never called, not once. I hadn't expected her to. What they didn't know was that I'd been busy, very busy. Richard Chan and I had become unlikely conspirators. He'd invited me to lunch at a quiet restaurant in Bellevue, far from anywhere Victoria or Marcus might accidentally see us, over Chilean sea bass and expensive wine that tasted like vinegar to my unsophisticated palate. We'd refined our strategy. Patricia doesn't know about any of this, Richard had said, cutting his fish with precise movements. She tried to talk me out of it. She thinks Victoria can do no wrong and you don't. He'd set down his fork and looked at me with tired eyes that held decades of complicated parenting. I love my daughter, but I don't like who she's becoming. This wedding, it's brought out the worst in her. The entitlement, the cruelty. She gets that from Patricia's side of the family. The old money crowd who think their bank balance makes them superior human beings. You married into that world. I did. And I've spent 30 years watching it corrupt good people into thinking status matters more than character. He paused. My parents came to this country with nothing. My father worked in a restaurant kitchen. My mother cleaned houses. They built their first hotel from scratch, working 18-hour days for years. I learned the business from them. Learned that money is just a tool, not a measure of human worth. Somewhere along the way, Victoria forgot that lesson. Or maybe we failed to teach it properly. So, you're helping me because you feel guilty. I'm helping you because someone needs to remind my daughter that actions have consequences, and because you're the only person in this situation who's been honest from the beginning. You never pretended to be something you're not. We'd clinked glasses on that. And I'd felt the first stirring of something that might eventually become forgiveness for Marcus. If even Victoria's own father could see how wrong this was, maybe my son wasn't entirely lost. Richard had taken care of several crucial details. He'd ensured that my name was on all the vendor contracts as the primary payer, not just a contributor. He'd confirmed with the Imperial Aurora's events team that any changes to the wedding arrangements required my approval in addition to Victoria's. And most importantly, he'd made sure that the final payment for all 3 major expenses, the catering, the flowers, and the photography, wasn't due until the day after the wedding. They'll have no idea until it's too late to fix it, he'd explained. The vendors all think the bills are settled because of our family's relationship with them. They trust that payment will come through. But legally, nothing is final until that wire transfer goes through on Sunday morning. And if I don't authorize the payment, then Victoria's dream wedding becomes her nightmare. No food for 300 guests. No flowers for the ceremony or reception. No professional photographs to document her perfect day. He'd smiled grimly. She'll learn the hard way that you can't build something beautiful on a foundation of cruelty. I'd gone home from that lunch feeling powerful in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not vindictive, not petty, but powerful. Like I'd finally stopped apologizing for taking up space in the world. The week before the wedding, Marcus showed up at my house unannounced. I was in my garden pulling weeds from the bed of roses I'd been cultivating for 15 years. I heard his car in the driveway and didn't stop working. Let him come to me. I looked up, shading my eyes against the afternoon sun. Marcus stood at the edge of my garden, looking uncomfortable in his expensive suit, like a stranger visiting a place he used to know. Marcus, this is a surprise. Can we talk? I went back to pulling weeds. We're talking now. Mom, please. I feel terrible about how things went down. I've been trying to call. You have called. We've talked. You've explained that I'm not invited to your wedding because I don't meet Victoria's standards for sophistication. What else is there to discuss? He flinched. It's not like that. You're twisting what we said, am I? I sat back on my heels looking at him directly. Then please explain to me what it's actually like. Use small words so my unsophisticated nurse brain can understand. You're being unfair. I'm being unfair. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's rich, Marcus. Really rich. You and your fiancé tell me I'm too embarrassing to attend my own son's wedding, and I'm the one being unfair. We never said embarrassing. What word would you prefer? Inappropriate, unsuitable, not aligned with the aesthetic. I stood up, pulling off my gardening gloves. The language doesn't matter. The meaning was clear. I'm not good enough for Victoria's world. And you're okay with that? Marcus ran his hands through his hair. That gesture he'd made since childhood when he was frustrated. I'm trying to start a life with the woman I love. Why can't you support that? I am supporting it. I congratulated you both. I wished you well. I'm giving you exactly what you asked for, my absence. But you're angry. Course I'm angry. The words burst out of me with more force than I'd intended. You're my son, my only child. I raised you alone, Marcus. Your father died and I could have fallen apart. Could have let grief destroy us both, but I didn't. I worked 2 jobs. I missed sleep. I sacrificed everything. Vacations, new clothes, retirement savings, everything. So you could have opportunities, so you could build a good life. And now that you've built that life, you've decided I'm too much of a liability to keep around. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Explain it to me in a way that makes sense. Explain to me how the woman who raised you, who loved you unconditionally for 35 years, suddenly isn't worthy of witnessing you get married. Marcus looked at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. Victoria's family is important to my career. Her father's hotels. They're expanding. They need architectural consultation. Richard has already thrown several projects my way. If I can keep him happy, if this wedding goes smoothly and makes the right impression, I'm looking at becoming the lead architect for their entire West Coast expansion. We're talking millions in contracts. Mom, millions. And there it was. The truth beneath all the careful justifications. So, you're selling me out for a business opportunity. I'm securing my future. Our future, mine and Victoria's. Is that so wrong? I looked at my son and saw a stranger. Or maybe I saw him clearly for the first time. Your father would be ashamed of you. The words hit him like a physical blow. His face went white, then red. That's not fair. Dad's not here. You don't get to speak for him. You're right. He's not here. But I knew him, Marcus. I knew what he valued, what he believed in, and he would never have chosen money over integrity. He would never have treated another human being as disposable just because they couldn't advance his career. I'm not treating you as disposable. Then what are you doing? He had no answer. We stood there in my garden surrounded by roses I planted the year after his father died. Each one representing a year I'd survived. A year I'd kept going for him. I should go, he said finally. I have a meeting with the caterer. Do you? I kept my voice carefully neutral. I hope that goes well. He gave me an odd look like he suspected something but couldn't quite put his finger on it. Then he left and I went back to my roses, pulling weeds and thinking about how we sometimes have to prune the dead branches to help the healthy parts grow. The day before the wedding, I received a call from Evangeline Rose, the wedding planner Victoria had been bragging about. Her voice was smooth and professional with an undercurrent of panic that she was trying hard to hide. Miss Cart, right? This is Evangeline Rose. I'm coordinating the Chun Patterson wedding tomorrow. I know who you are. Wonderful. I'm calling because we've encountered a small administrative issue with the final payments. It seems there's been some confusion about who's authorizing the transfers. Victoria insists her father is handling everything, but according to my contracts, you're listed as the primary contact for the catering, florals, and photography. That's correct. You see. Well, the thing is, we need final authorization by 5 o'clock today to ensure everything is ready for tomorrow. The caterers need to order ingredients. The florist needs to start assembly. And the photographers need to confirm their equipment rentals. Can you authorize those payments this afternoon? I looked at my watch. It was 2:30. No, I said simply. Silence. Then carefully. Sorry. Did you say no? I did. I'm not authorizing any payments today. Miss Cartwright, I don't think you understand. Without final payment authorization, the vendors will pull out. There will be no food tomorrow, no flowers, no photography. The wedding will be a disaster. Yes, I understand that perfectly. Another beat of silence, longer this time. May I ask why you're choosing to do this? Because I wasn't invited to the wedding. My son and his fiancée decided I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend, so I'm respecting their wishes. They don't want me there, and I don't want to pay for a party I'm excluded from. Seems fair, doesn't it? Oh my God. Evangeline's professional veneer cracked completely. You're the mother of the groom. Victoria actually uninvited you. She did. That woman is unbelievable. I've been planning weddings for 15 years and I've never she caught herself. Sorry. That was unprofessional. But Miss Cartwright, please reconsider. I understand you're hurt and you have every right to be. But there are 300 guests coming tomorrow. Innocent people who will suffer because of Victoria's cruelty. Those 300 guests are Victoria's friends and family. They're part of the world that decided I wasn't good enough to join. I don't owe them anything. What about Marcus? He's your son. That stopped me. I'd been so focused on Victoria, on teaching her a lesson, that I hadn't fully considered how this would affect Marcus. Not just his wedding day, but his relationship with Victoria's family, his business prospects, everything he'd been so worried about. Marcus made his choice, I said. Finally, he chose Victoria and her world over his own mother. Now he gets to live with that choice. Evangeline was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, almost conspiratorial. What if there was another way? What if we could make your point without completely destroying the wedding? I'm listening. Let me call Victoria. Let me tell her about the payment issue. See what she does, how she responds. If she calls you to apologize, if she begs you to come to the wedding and acknowledges how wrong she was, you authorize the payments and everyone wins. But if she tries to strong-arm you, if she refuses to admit she was wrong, then at least you gave her a chance. I considered it. Part of me wanted to burn the whole thing down to let Victoria's perfect day collapse spectacularly. But Evangeline was right. There were innocent people involved. And more importantly, if Victoria apologized, if she actually showed some humility and humanity, maybe there was hope for Marcus' marriage after all. Okay, call her. Tell her about the payment issue and that I'm the one who has to authorize it. Let's see what she does. I'll call you back within an hour. Evangeline called back in 45 minutes. Will I ask? She's on her way to your house. I've never heard someone so angry in my entire life. She called you some names I won't repeat. She said you were trying to sabotage her wedding out of jealousy and bitterness. She said she's going to make you authorize those payments even if she has to drag you to a bank herself. My doorbell rang. Is here. I said, "Good luck, Miss Cartwright. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this exactly right." I hung up and walked to my front door. Through the glass, I could see Victoria standing on my porch, her face flushed with fury, her designer purse clutched in white-knuckled hands. She was alone. Marcus wasn't with her. "Open the door." "You manipulative," Victoria said without preamble. "How dare you try to sabotage my wedding?" "Good afternoon to you too, Victoria. Would you like to come in?" "I don't want to come in. I want you to get on the phone right now and authorize those payments. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Do you understand that without those vendors, my entire wedding is ruined? I understand perfectly. That's rather the point. Her face went from red to purple. You're doing this because you're jealous. Because you're a bitter old woman who can't stand to see other people happy. I'm doing this because you uninvited me from my own son's wedding. Because you told me I wasn't good enough to attend, because you decided that my profession and my income level made me unsuitable to be seen in your fancy ballroom. That's not what I said. It's exactly what you said. And Marcus sat there and let you say it. Victoria's expression shifted, calculating now instead of just angry. Fine. You want an apology. Sorry. There, I apologize. Now authorize the payments. That's not an apology. That's a manipulation tactic. What do you want from me? She demanded. You want me to grovel, to beg. Fine. Please, Helen, please authorize the payments. My wedding is tomorrow. Everything is planned. Everything is perfect. Don't ruin it because of some misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding. You meant every word you said. Bae. Yes, I meant it. The facade cracked completely. You're not sophisticated. You don't fit in my world. You're a nurse who drives a Honda and lives in a house that probably costs less than my engagement ring. Is that what you want to hear? That you're not good enough? At least now you're being honest. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to something dangerous. You authorize those payments right now, or I will make sure Marcus never speaks to you again. I will poison every memory he has of you. I will make him choose between you and me, and we both know he'll choose me. Will he, though? Something in my tone made her pause. What does that mean? It means you've made a lot of assumptions about this situation. You've assumed I'm powerless. You've assumed Marcus will always side with you. You've assumed that money and status are all that matter. But you've forgotten something important. What's that? I'm his mother. I've known him his entire life. I know how he thinks, what he values deep down beneath all the ambition and social climbing. And most importantly, I know that the man I raised is still in there somewhere. The question is whether you're going to be the one who helps him remember or the one who destroys that last piece of his soul. Victoria stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. You're insane. No, I'm just done being treated like I don't matter. Fine, don't authorize the payments. Ruin my wedding, but when the dust settles, when Marcus realizes what you've done, when he cuts you out of his life completely, don't come crying to me about how unfair it is. You did this to yourself. She turned and stalked back to her car, her heels clicking angrily on my front walk. She didn't look back. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. My phone buzz. A text from Richard Chun. Victoria just called me screaming. She told me what you're doing. Stand firm. I've got your back. Another text came through. This one from Marcus. Mom, please. Whatever Victoria said, I'm sorry, but please don't ruin our wedding. I'm begging you. Not an apology, not an invitation, just a plea not to embarrass him. I turned off my phone and went to make tea. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. The morning of the wedding, I woke at 6 o'clock and couldn't fall back asleep. I made coffee, sat in my garden, and watched the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. My phone was still off. Whatever chaos was erupting in Victoria's world, I wasn't ready to be part of it yet. At 8, I showered and dressed in my best outfit, the same navy dress I'd worn to the engagement party. I did my makeup carefully, fixed my hair, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked exactly like what I was, a 63-year-old nurse who'd worked hard her entire life and had nothing to be ashamed of. At 9, I turned on my phone. It exploded with messages. 47 texts from Marcus, 32 from Victoria, 15 from Evangeline Rose, 5 from Richard Chun, even 2 from Patricia Chun, whose existence I barely registered before this. I ignored all of them and drove to the Imperial Aurora Hotel. The lobby was chaos. Florists were standing around with wilting flowers, arguing with the event's coordinator. Caterers were on their phones, clearly trying to figure out whether to start preparing food. A photographer and videographer were sitting on expensive leather couches, looking confused and anxious. And in the middle of it all stood Victoria in her street clothes, her hair already professionally done, but her face bare and her expression murderous. She saw me walk in and went absolutely still. Came. I did to authorize the payments to talk. There's nothing to talk about unless you're here to fix this mess. Marcus appeared from a hallway, also in street clothes. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. His eyes were red, his hair was a mess, and when he saw me, his face crumpled. Mom, thank God. Please, you have to help us. The vendors are all threatening to leave. The wedding is in 6 hours. Please, where's your father-in-law? I asked, ignoring his plea. Richard. Victoria looked confused. He's upstairs getting ready. Why? Have someone get him. All three of you need to hear what I have to say. Victoria made a call. 5 minutes later, Richard Chun emerged from the elevator wearing a tuxedo and an expression that suggested he knew exactly what was about to happen. He caught my eye and gave me the tiniest nod. Helen, he said formally. This is unexpected. Is it? I turned to face the three of them standing in the middle of the Imperial Aurora's grand lobby with confused vendors and hotel staff watching like this was better than reality television. I'm going to tell you all a story about a woman who met a businessman at a party and saw an opportunity about how that woman offered to pay for 3 major components of her son's wedding in exchange for a promise that she'd be included, that she'd be treated with respect, that she'd be acknowledged as family. Victoria's face went from confused to horrified as understanding dawned. No, you didn't. I did. I gave Richard $60,000. Money I saved, money I borrowed, money I scraped together from every corner of my life. And in exchange, he signed contracts putting my name as the primary payer for the catering, the flowers, and the photography. Your father didn't pay for those things, Victoria. I did. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the vendors had stopped talking, sensing they were witnessing something significant. Marcus looked between me and Richard, his face going through a complicated series of emotions. Dad, is this true? Richard had the grace to look uncomfortable. It is. Helen approached me months ago. She was worried Victoria would try to exclude her from the wedding, and she wanted to protect her investment. I agreed to act as an intermediary. You knew, Marcus said slowly. You knew Mom paid for all this, and you let Victoria uninvite her anyway. I let Victoria make her own choices so she could face the consequences of those choices, Richard replied. Your mother was right to worry. My daughter showed her true colors, and now she gets to deal with the fallout. Victoria rounded on her father, fury and betrayal wearing on her face. You set me up. You conspired with her to humiliate me. I conspired with no one. I simply facilitated Helen's generous contribution to your wedding and stayed out of family dynamics that didn't concern me. Family dynamics that didn't concern you. I'm your daughter and she's Marcus's mother. Tell me, Victoria, which relationship should take precedence at a wedding? Victoria had no answer for that. I stepped forward, drawing everyone's attention back to me. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go upstairs to the suite Richard has reserved for me and I'm going to get dressed for this wedding. At 3 o'clock, I'm going to walk into that ballroom and I'm going to sit in the front row where mothers of grooms traditionally sit. During the reception, Marcus is going to dance with me, the traditional mother-son dance. And Victoria is going to smile and pretend she's thrilled I'm there. And if I refuse, Victoria asks through clenched teeth. Then I don't authorize the final payments, and your wedding becomes the most legendary disaster in Seattle social history. 300 guests arriving to a ballroom with no food, no flowers, and no one to photograph them. I wonder what that will do to your family's reputation in the community you care so much about. Victoria looked like she wanted to physically attack me. Marcus just looked sick. You can't do this, Victoria said. But there was desperation in her voice now. You can't blackmail us into letting you attend. I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm simply insisting that the person who paid for the wedding be allowed to attend. Seems perfectly reasonable to me. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, please. This isn't you. You're not cruel like this. You're right. I'm not cruel. If I were cruel, I would have cancelled everything last night and let you wake up to the disaster this morning. Instead, I'm giving you a choice. Include me with grace and respect or lose everything you've planned. It's entirely up to you. Victoria and Marcus stood frozen, locked in a moment of terrible choice. I could see the calculation happening behind Victoria's eyes, weighing her pride against the social catastrophe of a failed wedding. Marcus just looked broken, caught between the woman he loved and the mother he'd betrayed. It was Richard who broke the silence. Victoria authorized Helen to attend. Now, Dad, you can't be serious. After what she's done, your mother-in-law offered to contribute $60,000 to your wedding. You responded by telling her she wasn't good enough to attend. You called her unsophisticated. You said she didn't fit your aesthetic. And when she rightfully withdrew her financial support, you came to her house and called her a Richard's voice was steel. So yes, I'm serious. You will include Helen in this wedding with grace and dignity, or I will personally ensure every vendor walks out of here in the next 10 minutes. Patricia Chun emerged from somewhere in the lobby looking immaculate in a champagne-colored dress. She took in the scene with one sweeping glance and immediately understood the power dynamics at play. Richard, what's going on? Our daughter tried to exclude the groom's mother from the wedding. The groom's mother, who incidentally paid for $60,000 worth of services. Now she's experiencing the consequences of that decision. Patricia's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Calculation maybe, or recognition that her daughter had finally gone too far. Missy. She turned to Victoria. Apologize to Mrs. Cartwright. Sincerely, Mother, you can't expect me to. I expect you to behave like a woman of breeding and grace. Right now, you're behaving like a spoiled child. Apologize. Victoria's face went through several shades of red and white. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I apologize for my words. You're welcome to attend the wedding. Look at me when you apologize, I said quietly. She did, and I saw real fear there for the first time. Fear that I might refuse, that I might let her wedding collapse despite the apology. Sorry, Helen. Truly, I was wrong to exclude you. You're Marcus's mother, and you deserve to be here. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't heartfelt, but it was something. I nodded slowly. I'll authorize the payments, but understand this, Victoria. You get one chance with me. One. The next time you treat me or anyone else like they're beneath you, I won't be so forgiving. I pulled out my phone and called Evangeline Rose, who answered on the first ring. Evangeline, this is Helen Cartwright. Authorize all final payments. The wedding is moving forward. The relief in her voice was palpable. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll get everyone moving immediately. Within minutes, the lobby transformed. Florists began rushing toward the ballroom with armfuls of roses and lilies. Caterers disappeared into service elevators heading for the kitchen. The photographer started testing his equipment. Crisis averted. Marcus approached me cautiously like I was something dangerous that might explode. Mom, I don't know what to say. Then don't say anything. Go get dressed. You're getting married in 5 hours. I'm sorry for everything. Victoria was right. I was wrong to let her exclude you. I was wrong to value business connections over my own mother. I looked at my son and saw the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd cried at his father's funeral, who'd once told me I was the strongest person he knew. Marcus, I love you. I will always love you. But you hurt me more than I knew I could be hurt. And that doesn't get fixed with a simple apology. No. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. See that you do. I touched his cheek gently. Your father would have been proud of the man you could become. Don't disappoint him. He nodded, tears in his eyes, and walked away. Richard appeared at my elbow. That was quite a performance. It wasn't a performance. It was a lesson. When my daughter needed to learn, he paused. The suite is ready for you. Everything you'll need is up there. Patricia and I made sure of it. Patricia helped. My wife has her faults, but she recognizes strength when she sees it. She respects what you did here today, even if she'll never admit it out loud. I went upstairs to find a suite that looked like something from a magazine. And laying across the bed was a dress, elegant and simple in a deep emerald green that would photograph beautifully. A note was pinned to it in Patricia's handwriting. A woman who stands her ground deserves to look stunning while doing it. Wear this, Patricia. I held the dress up and felt something unexpected. Not triumph exactly, but satisfaction. The kind that comes from refusing to be erased, from demanding to be seen. The wedding itself was beautiful. 300 guests filled the Imperial Aurora's grand ballroom, which had been transformed into something out of a fairy tale. White roses and crystal everywhere. Soft lighting that made everyone look luminous. An orchestra playing Vivaldi's. Guests took their seats. I sat in the front row right where I belonged, wearing Patricia's dress and holding my head high. Several guests stared at me with obvious curiosity, probably wondering who I was. Let them wonder. Marcus and Victoria exchanged vows under an arch of flowers that I'd paid for, surrounded by candles I'd made possible, documented by photographers whose services I'd secured. When the officiant said the words that made them husband and wife, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Joy for Marcus, yes, but also sadness for what we'd lost, and a grim satisfaction that I'd fought for my place here. The reception was everything Victoria had wanted. Perfect food, perfect music, perfect lighting. She worked the room like a politician, smiling and laughing and accepting congratulations. She didn't look at me once. But when the time came for the mother-son dance, Marcus walked across that ballroom, took my hand and led me to the dance floor. The orchestra began playing What a Wonderful World. And we swayed together under those expensive lights. I really am sorry, Mom said quietly. I got lost somewhere along the way. Forgot what actually matters. You forgot where you came from, who raised you, what you were taught about treating people. I know Victoria's world. So different from ours. I wanted to fit in so badly that I stopped questioning whether fitting in was worth the cost. And now he pulled back to look at me. Now I understand that some costs are too high. I almost lost you today. I almost became someone I wouldn't recognize in the mirror. You didn't lose me, but you came close. I won't forget that. Promise. The song ended and guests applauded politely. Victoria was watching from the head table. Her expression unreadable. Marcus kissed my cheek and went back to his bride. I danced with Richard next, a waltz that he led with surprising grace. You handled today well, he said. I had a good ally. You would have managed without me. You're tougher than most people realize. Had good teachers. Life and loss taught me how to survive. My daughter could learn from you. Your daughter needs to learn from her own mistakes. That's the only way lessons stick. He smiled at that. You're right though. I suspect this is one lesson she won't forget anytime soon. As the evening wound down and guests began leaving, Victoria finally approached me. She looked exhausted, her perfect makeup beginning to fade. Her smile now genuine tiredness rather than practice performance. Thank you for not destroying my wedding, she said. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Marcus. I know. She hesitated. I misjudged you. I thought you were just some simple woman who wouldn't fight back. I am a simple woman, but simple doesn't mean weak. I'm starting to understand that. She glanced across the room where Marcus was saying goodbye to guests. He loves you very much. He was a wreck this morning. Absolutely devastated at the thought of losing you. Then why did he let you exclude me in the first place? Victoria looked uncomfortable. 'Cause I pushed him. Because I was cruel and manipulative and I used his love for me as a weapon. That's not going to happen again. See that it doesn't, because next time I won't be so merciful. She nodded and walked away, leaving me alone at my table with empty champagne glasses and wilting centerpieces. Patricia Chun appeared beside me, elegant as always. You wore the dress beautifully. Thank you for the gesture. It was kind. It was strategic. I couldn't have the mother of the groom looking out of place. It would reflect poorly on all of us. But she smiled slightly when she said it, taking the edge off her words. Your daughter learned something today. My daughter learned that actions have consequences. That's a lesson her father and I should have taught her better years ago. Patricia sat down. Something I'd never seen her do at a social event. I owe you an apology as well. At the engagement party I was cold to you. Dismissive. I judged you based on your profession and your income level, and that was wrong. Why the change of heart? Because you stood up for yourself when most people would have crumbled. Because you played a difficult game with skill and grace. And because Richard has spent the last 2 weeks telling me what an impressive woman you are. My husband doesn't impress easily. We're not going to be best friends, I said bluntly. No, we're not. But we can be respectful. We can be civil, and we can both love Marcus and want what's best for him. Can agree to that. She stood smoothing her dress. The offer stands. By the way, if you ever need anything at all, Richard and I will help you. Consider it repayment for what you contributed today. After she left, I sat alone for a while longer, watching the cleaning crew begin to dismantle the beautiful wedding Victoria had created. In a few hours, this ballroom would be empty, ready for the next event. Nothing lasted forever, not even perfect moments. Marcus found me there as I was preparing to leave. Wait, I wanted to give you something. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $60,000. What's this? Payment for everything you covered. I can't let you bear that cost. Not after everything that happened. Marcus, I don't want your money. It's not charity. It's what's right. You shouldn't have to go into debt for a wedding you almost weren't allowed to attend. I looked at the check, then at my son. Keep it. Put it toward a house or savings or whatever you and Victoria need. Consider it my wedding gift. Mom, that's too much. It's exactly enough, because now you understand what it cost me. Not just in dollars, but in pride, in heartache, in the decision to fight for my place in your life. Every time you think about this money, I want you to remember what happened here. Remember that people aren't disposable, that love isn't measured in status or sophistication, that your mother is someone who deserves respect. He pulled me into a hug, and I felt him shaking with silent tears. I love you, Mom. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, sweetheart. You know. We stayed like that for a long moment, mother and son, finding our way back to each other. When I finally left the Imperial Aurora, driving my 10-year-old Honda away from the luxury hotel with its crystal chandeliers and its lessons learned, I felt lighter than I had in months. I'd fought for my dignity and won. I demanded respect and received it. I'd reminded my son of who he really was beneath the ambition and social climbing. The next morning, I woke up to find a text from Marcus with a photo attached. It was him and Victoria at the airport heading to their honeymoon in Bali. But it wasn't the destination that caught my attention. It was what Victoria was wearing. A simple t-shirt that said "Family First" in bold letters. Marcus's message read she bought it at the airport gift shop this morning. Said she needed a reminder. Love you, Mom. Talk soon. I smiled and set down my phone. Maybe Victoria would change. Maybe she'd learn to value people over status. Or maybe she wouldn't, and Marcus would have to make harder choices down the road. But at least now, my son knew that his mother wouldn't disappear quietly. That some things were worth fighting for. And that family, real family, wasn't about bloodlines or social standing. It was about who showed up, who fought for you, who refused to let you forget where you came from. I'd shown up, I'd fought. And I'd won something more valuable than any wedding. I'd won my self-respect. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them.